are a number of characteristics or attributes or qualities of public opinion which may, depending on the issue, affect the response of government. Distribution refers to the numerical strength, which is usually expressed as a percentage or a ratio of the various opinions held on an issue. For example, when we say that 40% of survey respondents support position X, and that 35% support position Y, and that 25% support position Z, we are referring to the distribution of opinions on the issue. Frequently, it is useful to graphically depict the distribution of opinions on an issue. We can graph the distribution to get a picture of what it looks like. Distribution of opinions, then, is like the distribution of anything else, the distribution of wealth, the distribution of grades, etc. For example, if your professor showed you one of the following graphs of the results on the most recent exam, she would be reporting the distribution of grades. And you can immediately glean some information from the graph about exam results. Distributions can take a variety of shapes. The first graph reports a skewed distribution. This is sometimes referred to as a J-curve distribution. The second graph indicates a normal distribution of grades, sometimes called a bell curve distribution. And the third graph indicates a bimodal distribution of grades. Distributions of opinions on issues can also take a variety of forms. The key question for us is, how does the shape of the distribution affect how government responds to opinion? Depending on the shape of the distribution, the response of government may be more or less straightforward. Examine each of the following distributions that are depicted here and consider how the distribution might affect government's response, assuming that distribution is the only attribute of public opinion that is relevant. Distribution is the characteristic of public opinion that pollsters generally report when they report the findings of their latest surveys. Here, in a 2013 poll, CNN ORC International is reporting the distribution of opinions on the gun control issue. Here, the Gallup poll is reporting the distribution of opinions on the death penalty issue over a period of several decades. Distribution is clearly the most important characteristic of opinion on electoral issues. It plays a less obvious role on policy issues. In other words, in elections, it is the distribution of opinions, rather than any of the other characteristics of opinion, that determines the response of government. If candidate A receives 49% of the vote, and candidate B receives 42% of the vote, and candidate C receives 8% of the vote, then the distribution determines the response. Candidate A wins. If you think about it, an election is really a public opinion poll, right? It is a very formal and official public opinion poll, to be sure. The election results that are reported by the news media coverage of election returns is just reporting the distribution of attitudes about leadership preferences among people in the single issue ad hoc public that is formed for the purposes of electing public officials. These attitudes are expressed when people cast ballots in the election.